The screeching of tires against wet pavement echoed through Manhattan's Upper East Side as Maxwell Blackwood slammed on the brakes of his matte black Lamborghini. A taxi had cut him off, causing him to nearly hydroplane across 3 lanes. Maxwell's knuckles turned white against the steering wheel as his Patek Philippe watch glinted in the morning light. Today was not the day for this. The merger documents needed his signature by noon, and his father had scheduled another dinner with the Astors to discuss the arrangement. $3 billion in assets, and I still have to put up with this prehistoric tradition, Maxwell muttered, running his fingers through his perfectly styled dark hair. Maxwell Blackwood, 32, named one of New York's most eligible bachelors 4 years running despite his notorious reputation, was being forced into an arranged marriage with Sophia Astor, heiress to the Astor Hotel empire. A business consolidation, disguised as matrimony. As the rain intensified, Maxwell spotted the small bookshop on the corner, Foxglove Books. He'd driven past it hundreds of times but never entered. Today, seeking refuge from both the storm and his thoughts, he parked illegally and dashed inside. The shop was warm, filled with the comforting scent of old pages and cinnamon. Unlike the cold, calculated world of high finance he dominated, this place felt authentic. Maxwell loosened his Italian silk tie, suddenly aware of how out of place his $12,000 suit looked amidst the worn leather chairs and overstuffed bookshelves. "Can I help you find something?" The voice was melodic, confident but gentle. Maxwell turned to find himself face to face with a woman so unlike those in his social circle that he momentarily forgot to respond. Auburn hair piled messily atop him, her head, wire-rimmed glasses perched on a freckled nose, and green eyes that showed not a hint of recognition or intimidation. Her name tag read, Emma. No, just browsing," he replied, uncharacteristically tongue-tied. Emma Hayes nodded politely but looked unimpressed. "Well, new arrivals are on the table by the window. Classics are to your left. Coffee's free for customers." With that, she returned to a stack of books she was cataloging, leaving Maxwell standing there feeling oddly dismissed. Nobody dismissed Maxwell Blackwood, ever. "Actually," he said, approaching her desk with his usual swagger returning, "I'm looking for something rare." Emma looked up, one eyebrow raised. "Such as? First edition Fitzgerald, perhaps? Money's no object." Emma's laugh was genuine and caught him off guard. "Of course it isn't," she said, gesturing to his custom suit. "But I'm afraid we don't keep our first editions on the sales floor, Mr. Blackwood." "Maxwell Blackwood," he replied, waiting for the recognition to dawn. It didn't. "Well, Mr. Blackwood, those books are by appointment only. Our curator handles the rare books collection. I'm just the manager." Just the manager. There was nothing just about her. For a man accustomed to women falling over themselves in his presence, Emma's casual indifference was both infuriating and intoxicating. Before he could respond, his phone rang. His father. Maxwell declined the call and instead found himself saying, "Then I'd like to make an appointment." Emma handed him a business card. "Call this number tomorrow. Claire handles the appointments." "Not you?" "Not me," she confirmed, returning to her work. As Maxwell left the shop, merger forgotten, rain soaking through his jacket, he glanced back through the window. Emma was helping an elderly customer, laughing at something the woman said. For the first time in years, Maxwell felt like he was standing outside looking in at something genuine. He slid back into his Lamborghini, his mind already plotting a return to Foxglove Books. The merger could wait. The Astors could wait. Maxwell Blackwood had just found something far more interesting than business deals and arranged marriages, and he always got what he wanted. The following morning, Maxwell arrived at his penthouse office overlooking Central Park, his mind still lingering on the auburn-haired bookshop manager. His assistant, Tyler, was waiting with his usual espresso and a stack of urgent contracts. "Your father called 3 times, Tyler said, trailing behind Maxwell into his minimalist office. "And Ms. Astor's assistant wants to confirm dinner tonight at Le Bernardin." Maxwell loosened his tie. "Cancel dinner. Tell them something came up." Tyler's eyebrows shot up. Cancel on the asters. My father will survive. Maxwell interrupted, pulling out the small business card from his jacket pocket. And call this number. I want an appointment at Foxglove Books, their rare books collection. Today. 2 hours later, Maxwell strode into the bookshop, this time in a deliberately casual cashmere sweater that still cost more than most people's monthly rent. The bell above the door jingled cheerfully and Maxwell scanned the space for Emma. Instead, he was greeted by a petite woman with silver hair. Mr. Blackwood, I'm Claire Winters, rare books curator. Your assistant was quite persuasive about fitting you in today. Maxwell flashed his practiced smile. I appreciate it. Is Emma working today? Claire's eyes twinkled knowingly. Ms. Hayes is in the back. She'll be out shortly. She gestured toward a door marked Staff Only. Shall we begin with the Fitzgeralds you inquired about? Before Maxwell could respond, Emma emerged carrying a stack of books that nearly obscured her face. Today she wore a simple blue dress that complemented her eyes, her hair in a loose braid down her back. Maxwell instinctively moved to help, taking half the stack from her arms. Oh, thank you, she said before realizing who stood before her. Her smile faltered slightly. Mr. Blackwood, you're back. Maxwell, he corrected, holding the books with ease. And yes, I had some time between meetings. Emma rolled her eyes. Of course you did. Claire, are you showing him the first editions? I was about to, Claire replied, noticing the tension between them with unconcealed amusement. I can take over, Emma offered unexpectedly. You should rest your knee, doctor's orders. Claire looked between the two of them and smiled. How thoughtful. The Fitzgeralds are already on the table in the reading room. Left alone with Emma, Maxwell followed her to a small, cozy room lined with glass-enclosed bookshelves. A single table sat in the center with white gloves and a first edition of The Great Gatsby waiting. So, Emma began professionally, what brings a man like you to collect first editions? Investment opportunity? Status symbol? Maxwell set down the books he'd carried. Do you always judge your customers so quickly? Only the ones who arrive in Lamborghinis and name-drop their wealth within the first minute of conversation, she replied. But her eyes held a glimmer of humor. For once, Maxwell felt seen through his facade. Fair enough. My grandfather collected books. Real books, not just status symbols. He left me his collection when he died. Emma's expression softened at the unexpected vulnerability. And what was his favorite? Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. He said it reminded him that true strength isn't about conquering but enduring. Emma handed him the white gloves. Put these on, and tell me more about this grandfather who sounds nothing like the Maxwell Blackwood I've read about in the business pages. Maxwell paused, gloves halfway on. You Googled me? After you left yesterday, hard to miss New York's most ruthless bachelor billionaire. She mimicked quotation marks with her fingers. Maxwell laughed genuinely. Don't believe everything you read. I generally don't, she replied, carefully opening the Fitzgerald first edition. That's why I read the actual court documents about how you dismantled that family-owned publishing house last year. Maxwell's smile faded. He hadn't expected to be called out so directly, especially not by someone whose eyes could switch from warm to challenging in an instant. Before he could defend himself, his phone rang again. His father. Again. Aren't you going to get that? Emma asked. Maxwell silenced the phone. No. I'd rather hear more about why you think I'm the villain in this story. Emma's laugh was unexpected and bright. Oh, I don't think you're the villain, Mr. Blackwood. Maxwell. Maxwell, she conceded. I think you're the protagonist who doesn't realize he's in the wrong story. Their eyes locked, the rare book momentarily forgotten. For the first time in years, Maxwell felt the thrill of meeting someone who wouldn't be easily impressed or acquired. Someone who saw through the Blackwood armor to something he himself had almost forgotten existed. The moment was shattered by Maxwell's assistant calling. This time he answered. What is it, Tyler? The Astors are where? Stall them. I'll be there in 20. He hung up, regret evident on his face. I have to go. Family business. Emma nodded, professional once more. Of course. The appointment fee is $250 for the hour, even if you don't use it all. Worth every penny, Maxwell replied, removing the gloves. Same time tomorrow? We're booked tomorrow. The day after? Emma hesitated, then nodded. Fine. But next time, maybe come with actual questions about the books. As Maxwell left, Claire approached Emma with a knowing smile. He's not just here for the Fitzgeralds, is he? Emma watched Maxwell's retreating figure through the window. No. But whatever he is here for, it's not going to end well. Men like that don't change their stories. Yet as she returned to cataloging, Emma couldn't help but wonder about the glimpse of genuine passion she'd seen when Maxwell spoke about his grandfather. Perhaps there were chapters to Maxwell Blackwood that hadn't made the tabloids after all. You canceled dinner with the Astors to visit a bookshop? Harrison Blackwood's voice boomed across the private dining room of his exclusive club. Have you lost your mind, Maxwell? Maxwell maintained his composure, swirling the 30-year-old scotch in his glass. I had a prior engagement. With books? Harrison scoffed. The merger with Astor Hotels depends on this union. Do you understand what's at stake? Perfectly, Maxwell replied coolly. What I don't understand is why, in 2025, we're still arranging marriages like medieval royalty. Harrison leaned forward, lowering his voice. The Astors are selling to someone. If not to us, then to Zhang International. We lose the Asian market instantly. Then buy them out the normal way. They won't sell without the marriage guarantee. It's how they ensure family legacy. Harrison's expression softened marginally. Maxwell, I didn't raise you to be weak. One dinner, one marriage, for the future of Blackwood Industries. Maxwell thought of Emma's words, the protagonist who doesn't realize he's in the wrong story. For the first time, he wondered if she was right. 2 days later, Maxwell returned to Foxglove Books, this time carrying a worn copy of The Old Man in the Sea. The shop was busy with afternoon customers. Emma moved efficiently between shelves, helping an elderly man find a mystery novel, then directing a young couple to the poetry section. She wore jeans and a forest green sweater that made her eyes even more striking. When she spotted Maxwell, she checked her watch. You're early. I know, he admitted. I wanted to see how this place actually runs. It's different. Emma raised an eyebrow. Different from dismantling family businesses in boardrooms. Touché. Maxwell held out the Hemingway. My grandfather's copy, I thought you might want to see it. Surprise flickered across Emma's face as she gently took the book. She opened it carefully, finding annotations in the margins, a pressed flower between pages, a life contained in the notes. This is personal, she said quietly. Why show me? Maxwell hesitated. To prove I'm not just the villain from the business pages. A genuine smile spread across Emma's face. Well, it's a start. They moved to the rare books room, where Emma had prepared several Hemingway first editions alongside the Fitzgeralds. As Maxwell examined them, their conversation flowed naturally from literature to art to travel. You've really never been to Paris? Maxwell asked incredulously. Emma shelved a book. Some of us don't have private jets, Maxwell. You should see it. The small bookshops along the Seine. You'd love Shakespeare and Company. Someday, Emma replied with a wistful smile. After I finish my PhD in literature. You're working on a doctorate? Nights and weekends, 4 years in. Just need to finish my dissertation on forgotten female modernist writers. Maxwell watched her speak passionately about her research, her hands animated, eyes bright. Something shifted in his chest. Admiration, not just attraction. Have dinner with me, he said suddenly. Emma's expression closed off. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Because men like you don't date women like me, Maxwell. We both know this isn't real life. What if I Want it to be? Emma studied him carefully. Then prove it. Come to our reading group tomorrow night. No designer clothes, no name dropping. Just you and some actual book lovers discussing Virginia Woolf. Maxwell hesitated only briefly. Deal. The reading group was held in the bookstore after hours. Mismatched chairs arranged in a circle, wine in plastic cups. Passionate readers from all walks of life. Maxwell arrived in jeans and a simple button-down, carrying his well-read copy of To the Lighthouse. Emma's surprise at seeing him quickly turned to amusement as he struggled to keep up with the heated literary debates. But when he finally spoke about the lighthouse as a symbol of unattainable perfection, the group fell silent considering his perspective. Afterward, as they closed up the shop, Emma approached him. You actually read it. Cover to cover, Maxwell confirmed. Twice, actually. Why? Because you challenged me. And because... He stepped closer. I wanted to understand what matters to you. The air between them charged with tension. Emma's phone chimed with a text, breaking the moment. It's my roommate, she said, checking the message. Water pipe broke in our apartment, everything's flooded. Let me help, Maxwell offered immediately. Emma shook her head. This isn't a problem you can throw money at. No, Maxwell agreed. But I can throw time at it, and maybe some actual plumbing skills you don't know I have. Emma looked skeptical. You know plumbing? My grandfather believed every man should know how to work with his hands. Let me help, Emma. As a friend. The word friend hung between them, both knowing it wasn't quite right but neither ready to name what was growing instead. The apartment was indeed a disaster. Water soaking the hardwood floors, books hastily piled on tables. Emma's roommate, Zoe, a surgical resident, was attempting to contain the leak with pots and pans. You must be the billionaire, Zoe said, bluntly when Maxwell walked in. Tonight I'm just the plumber, Maxwell replied, rolling up his sleeves. For 3 hours, Maxwell worked alongside them, finding the damaged pipe, making a temporary fix, helping move furniture, salvaging Emma's book collection. His hands blistered, his clothes soaked, but something about the simple physical work felt liberating. As they finally collapsed on the one dry couch, drinking beer and eating pizza, Maxwell realized he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt so normal, so present. Emma watched him curiously. You're full of surprises, Blackwood. Good ones, I hope. Their eyes met, a moment of perfect understanding passing between them. Then Maxwell's phone rang, Sophia Astor's name flashing on the screen. Reality crashed back. Maxwell declined the call, but the damage was done. Emma had seen the name. Sophia Astor? She asked quietly, as in Astor Hotels? Maxwell's silence was answer enough. Let me guess, Emma continued, her voice growing distant. Arranged merger disguised as marriage? Maxwell reached for her hand, but she pulled away. It's complicated. No, Emma said firmly. It's actually very simple. You're engaged, or as good as. And I'm the foolish distraction. You're not a distraction, Emma. Then what am I, Maxwell? Because from where I'm standing, I'm just another acquisition that caught your eye. A novelty. The quaint bookshop manager who doesn't fall at your feet. Maxwell stood frustrated. That's not fair. Neither is letting me believe you're available when you're not, Emma replied, her voice breaking slightly. I think you should go. As Maxwell left the apartment, he felt the weight of two worlds colliding, the life he was expected to lead and the one he was discovering he wanted. For a man accustomed to getting everything he desired, Maxwell Blackwood was suddenly faced with an impossible choice. 3 days passed without Maxwell returning to Foxglove Books. 3 days of Emma jumping whenever the bell above the door chimed, only to feel both relief and disappointment when it wasn't him. 3 days of telling herself it was better this way. You're checking your phone again, Claire observed as they sorted new arrivals. I'm not, Emma protested, pocketing her device. He's engaged, Emma, to Sophia Astor. It's been in the business section all week. Emma froze. What? Claire handed her the tablet open to the New York Times business page. Blackwood-Astor merger solidified, wedding set for June. The photo showed Maxwell beside a stunning blonde woman, both smiling coolly at the camera, looking every inch the perfect power couple. I knew, Emma said quietly. I just didn't know it was official. Claire squeezed her shoulder. Men like that don't change their stories, remember? Emma nodded, returning to her work with determined focus. She had a dissertation to finish, a bookshop to manage, a life that had been perfectly fine before Maxwell Blackwood walked through her door. You look miserable, Harrison Blackwood remarked as Maxwell stared out the penthouse window. I'm fine, Maxwell replied automatically. The announcement has been made. The contracts are being finalized. Harrison studied his son. This is what we've worked for. Maxwell turned. What you've worked for? Not me. Don't be dramatic. The Astor girl is beautiful, connected, appropriate. Your mother approves. I don't love her. Harrison laughed, sharply. Love? This is business, Maxwell. Maybe that's the problem, Maxwell said quietly. My whole life has been business. Harrison's expression hardened. We had an agreement. No, you had expectations. I never agreed to any of this. Maxwell straightened his shoulders. I'm not marrying Sophia. You'll destroy everything we've built. Then I'll rebuild it. Differently. Better. Maxwell headed for the door. Where are you going? Harrison demanded. Maxwell paused. To fix the story I'm in. Emma was locking up foxglove books when a familiar Lamborghini screeched to a halt outside. Her heart raced as Maxwell emerged, his usual polished appearance replaced by someone who looked like he hadn't slept in days. We're closed, she called through the glass. I know, Maxwell replied. I need 5 minutes. Congratulations on your engagement, Emma said flatly, refusing to unlock the door. I'm not engaged. Emma pointed to her phone. The New York Times disagrees. The Times is wrong, Maxwell insisted. I called it off. This gave Emma pause. She unlocked the door but remained in the doorway. Why would you do that? It was the perfect business arrangement. Because it was the wrong story. Maxwell stepped closer. You were right, Emma. I was the protagonist in the wrong story. A story about acquisitions and mergers and hollow achievements. And what story are you in now? Emma asked, her voice wavering slightly. I don't know yet, Maxwell admitted, but I know it has to include you. Emma shook her head. Maxwell, you can't just walk away from your life. I'm not walking away from anything. I'm walking towards something. He took her hand. I told my father I'm still taking over the company, but on my terms. No arranged marriages. No hostile takeovers of family businesses. He agreed to that? Eventually. After I reminded him who controls the majority shares now. Maxwell smiled ruefully. And after I pointed out that his own marriage was a love match, not a business merger, Emma finally allowed herself to really look at him. And what about Sophia? Relieved, actually. Turns out she's been dating her bodyguard for years. Maxwell laughed. We're restructuring as a straightforward business partnership instead. Emma felt the wall she'd built crumbling. This is still crazy, we barely know each other. I know that you're brilliant and challenging and passionate about literature. I know that you see through facades and demand authenticity. I know that when you talk about books, your eyes light up like you're sharing secrets of the universe. Maxwell paused, vulnerability written across his face. And I know that I haven't felt truly alive in years until I walked into this bookshop. Emma's resolve weakened further. What exactly are you proposing here, Blackwood? A new chapter, he said simply. Starting with dinner, a real date. No pretenses, no business angles. Just two people seeing where this story goes. And if it doesn't work out? Then we tried, but Emma. Maxwell stepped closer. What if it does? The space between them hummed with possibility. Emma thought of all the reasons to say no, all the ways they were different, all the potential heartbreak. Then she thought of the annotations in his grandfather's book, the way he'd rolled up his sleeves to fix her apartment, the passionate insights about Virginia Woolf that had surprised everyone. "One condition," she said finally. "Name it." "You fund a scholarship for my dissertation program." "Not for me," she clarified quickly. "For students who need it, who deserve the chance." Maxwell grinned. "Already done. I called your department chair yesterday." "You what?" "I believe in your work, Emma. In the voices you're trying to amplify." He reached for her hand. "So, dinner?" Emma felt the final brick in her wall topple. "Yes, but not at some ridiculous 5-star restaurant where they serve foam instead of food." "Your choice. Anywhere." "The diner across from my apartment. Best pancakes in the city." Maxwell's smile widened. "Pancakes for dinner? Scandalous." "Get used to it, billionaire boy," Emma teased, finally allowing herself to smile back. "My story comes with midnight breakfast and dog-eared paperbacks." "Sounds perfect," Maxwell said, and as he leaned in to kiss her, Emma realized that sometimes the best stories are the ones you never see coming. 6 months later, Foxglove Books had expanded to include a rare books foundation that preserved and shared literary treasures with schools across the city. Maxwell's office now included a worn leather chair where he actually read the books he collected. Emma's dissertation received full funding, and she split her time between teaching literature and managing the bookshop she loved. Harrison Blackwood grudgingly admitted that Maxwell's new approach to business, ethical, sustainable, community-minded, was actually increasing their profits while rebuilding their reputation. As for Maxwell and Emma, they were taking their story one page at a time, discovering that the best plot twists are the ones that challenge you to become more than you were, that push you to write a better story than you imagined possible. Claire smiled knowingly whenever she caught them lost in conversation among the bookshelves, debating literature or planning their upcoming trip to Paris to visit those bookshops along the Seine. "I told you men like that don't change their stories," Claire remarked to Emma one day. "You were right," Emma agreed, watching as Maxwell helped a young boy find adventure books across the shop. "He didn't change his story." "No?" Emma smiled. "He found a better one to tell."
Sophia Carter sat upright at her desk in the executive office of Lancaster Holdings, her hand unconsciously resting on her stomach beneath the loose blazer. She had kept this secret for 8 months and 3 weeks, and if everything went according to plan, she would leave in just a few weeks, without anyone ever knowing. But every plan had flaws. The sound of Italian leather shoes tapping against marble signaled the arrival of Damien Lancaster. His sharp gray eyes scanned the office before settling on her. "You look different today." Sophia's heart clenched, but her voice remained steady. "New blazer." Damien narrowed his eyes slightly, but said nothing more. He continued into his office, but Sophia knew he had noticed something. She took a slow breath, forcing her focus back on the screen. But the moment her fingers touched the keyboard, a sudden pain clenched deep in her abdomen. Sophia bit down on her lip, waiting for it to pass. No, it was too soon. She still had 3 weeks. Everything had to go according to plan. Through the glass door, she watched Damien stride across the room, exuding control. Sophia closed her eyes, whispering to herself, "It's fine, I have this under control." She had no idea this secret, this carefully built lie, was seconds away from unraveling. Sophia had once believed she would never make a mistake like this. But that night in Chicago, she let emotions win over reason. A raging storm had delayed their flight indefinitely. While waiting, she and Damien sat at the hotel bar, both exhausted after a long day of negotiations. "One drink won't make you lose control, Sophia," Damien had said, his sharp eyes softer than usual. One drink, then another. Their conversation shifted from work to something more personal. The sacrifices made for success, the lonely nights in the office, and then in the dimly lit bar filled with the haze of whiskey and unspoken words, the line between them blurred. The first kiss in the elevator, his breath warm against her skin as the hotel room door clicked shut, the whispered words, the burning touch of his fingers against her body. By morning, the storm had cleared. Damien had simply buttoned his crisp shirt, his face unreadable, his touch absent, like the night had never happened. No promises, no lingering looks. Just her, left alone with the consequence. Sophia tried to push the memories aside and focus on work, but the pain from this morning hadn't faded. It had only gotten worse. After work, she went to her best friend Elena Brooks' apartment. The moment Elena saw her, she frowned. "You don't look okay, Sophia. You're pale." "I'm just tired," she lied. But the moment she sat down, a sharp pain clinched her lower abdomen, making her grip the armrest. "That's not exhaustion, that's labor," Elena shouted. "I'm calling an ambulance." "No!" Panic surged through Sophia. If she went to the hospital, Damien would find out. Elena clenched her jaw. "Then at least let me call an Uber." The car weaved through New York's evening traffic as Sophia tried to convince herself these were just Braxton Hicks contractions. But when her water suddenly broke, reality hit her like a freight train. She was in labor. Before she could catch her breath, a car in front of them swerved sharply. Screeching tires, the deafening crunch of metal against metal, the violent jolt sent Sophia's world spinning. The impact hurled Sophia forward. A sharp pain tore through her stomach. Her phone slipped from her grasp, clattering onto the floor. "Sophia!" Elena screamed, but her voice sounded distant. When the world stopped spinning, all Sophia could feel was the warm wetness between her legs and the searing pain spreading through her body. The baby wasn't waiting anymore. A paramedic yanked the door open, his voice urgent over the radio. "Female, approximately 34 weeks pregnant, motor vehicle accident, active labor. We need immediate transport to the hospital." Elena grabbed Sophia's phone from the floor, the screen cracked but still glowing. The emergency contact flashed across the screen. Damien Lancaster. Damien Lancaster sat in the executive boardroom of Lancaster Holdings, reviewing a multi-million-dollar contract. Everything was going according to plan, just as he always ensured it did. Then his phone rang. He almost ignored it, but when he saw the caller ID, a chill ran down his spine. "Mount Sinai Hospital," he answered, his voice steady as always. "Damien Lancaster." "Mr. Lancaster, This is Dr. Regina Chen from Mount Sinai's emergency department. We're calling regarding Sophia Carter. She's been in an accident and is currently in labor." Time froze. "In labor?" His voice dropped to a lethal calm. "She's approximately 34 weeks pregnant. We need you to come immediately." The blood in his veins turned to ice. The puzzle pieces clicked into place. Sophia leaving early, the loose blazers, the way she had avoided his gaze. She had been hiding this from him for months. And now the truth came crashing down like a tidal wave, drowning every ounce of control he thought he had. All rational thought disappeared as he shot to his feet, grabbing his coat. "Don't let her leave," he ordered before hanging up. No one dared to stop him as he strode through the office, his presence cutting through the air like a blade. As he sped through Manhattan's traffic, only one question repeated in his mind. Why did she think he didn't deserve to know? When Damien stepped through the hospital doors, the world around him blurred into insignificance. Sophia was pregnant. She had been carrying his child for 8 months and had never said a word. A nurse led him to the emergency room. The doors swung open and he saw her, lying on the hospital bed, pale from pain, hair damp with sweat, but still, Sophia. Her eyes widened when she saw him. Maybe she had hoped he wouldn't come. "Damien?" Her voice was hoarse, breathless. "I was going to tell you." A violent contraction cut off her words. Damien's fists clenched. Anger, betrayal, confusion, all of it swirled inside him, but right now only one thing mattered. He stepped to her bedside, took her trembling hand in his. "We will talk about this, but not now." His voice was steady, unwavering. "Right now, you need to focus on delivering our child." She stared up at him, uncertainty clouding her expression. But then another contraction hit, and she gripped his hand so tightly that her nails dug into his skin. "Doctor, the baby is crowning," a nurse called. "Sophia, you need to push," the doctor urged. She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "I can't." "Yes, you can." Damien's tone was firm, unwavering. He leaned down, gripping her hand tighter. "I've worked with you for years. I've never seen you back down. Don't start now." Sophia's breath hitched. Then she nodded. The next contraction came. She pushed with everything she had. A sharp, piercing cry filled the room. "Congratulations, it's a boy." Sophia broke into sobs. Damien stood frozen, watching as the nurse wrapped the tiny baby in a blanket. Someone handed him scissors. Would Dad like to cut the cord? For the first time in his life, Damien Lancaster had no idea what to do. But as he held the scissors, hovering over the umbilical cord, something shifted. This wasn't a business deal. This wasn't a calculated move. This was his son. But somehow, his hands remained steady as he severed the delicate connection between mother and child. And in that moment, he knew. Everything had changed forever. Damien didn't leave the hospital, even after the doctors assured him that both Sophia and the baby were fine. He stayed, sitting silently beside her bed, his sharp gray eyes never straying far from her or the newborn. Hours later, when Sophia finally woke, she found herself in the quiet recovery ward. Beside her, Damien was holding Lucas Lancaster in his arms. The sight made her throat tighten. "You're still here?" she whispered. Damien looked up, his face unreadable. He hadn't slept, yet he didn't seem tired. "Did you think I'd leave?" His voice was low, dangerous. Sophia gripped the blanket tighter. "You don't have to do this, Damien. You don't owe me anything." Damien was silent for a long moment. Then he stood, stepping closer to her bed. "Oh, you?" His brow lifted. "Sophia, do you really think I'd find out I have a son and just walk away?" She bit her lip, looking away. "You don't have to take responsibility. I can handle this on my own." Damien placed Lucas carefully in the bassinet beside her, then leaned in, hands braced on the edge of her bed. There were only inches between them now. "Is that what you think?" His voice had gone rough. "That I'm only here out of obligation?" Sophia's breath caught. "You're Damien Lancaster. You don't believe in marriage. You don't believe in family. I've heard you say it 100 times. Damien studied her for a long moment. "Then let me prove you wrong, Sophia. Not with words, not with promises, but with actions. With us. 3 days later, the doctor cleared Sophia for discharge. Damien had arranged everything. A sleek black SUV waited outside. A nurse carefully secured Lucas in the car seat. Everything ran smoothly, efficiently, just as Damien Lancaster always ensured. Sophia sat in the passenger seat, a storm raging inside her. She knew she should feel grateful. Instead, all she felt was trapped. When they arrived at Damien's penthouse, the doors opened, and she froze. This place had always been minimalistic, cold, devoid of any signs of life beyond its luxurious furniture. But now, a crib stood neatly in the master bedroom. Baby formula, a changing table, a bottle warmer, all perfectly arranged. Sophia turned to Damien. "You did all this in 3 days?" He shrugged off his coat, voice calm. "I don't intend to be an absent father." But that only made her panic more. "Damien, I can't stay here." He stilled. "What?" She took a deep breath. "I had a plan. I was moving to Boston. I got a job offer there." "Liam Whitmore." Damien's voice was no longer sharp. It was lethal, dripping with controlled fury. "You were planning to take my son away?" Sophia clenched her hands. "I wasn't taking him from you. I just..." "Just what, Sophia?" He stepped closer, his gaze burning into her. "You think I'm just doing my duty? You think I'd let you walk away without a fight?" Her throat tightened. "I can't stay here just because you feel obligated." Damien stared at her for a long moment. Then slowly, he nodded. "If you want to leave, I won't stop you." She hadn't expected that. "But don't think for a second that I won't fight to keep my son in my life." Her heart pounded. She had been prepared to leave. So why did it feel like she was the one being left behind? The next morning, Sophia woke with a heavy sense of unease. She was no longer in the hospital, but the air in Damien's penthouse felt more suffocating than any sterile white walls. She quietly stepped into the living room, only to find Damien already awake, standing by the window, his phone clutched tightly in his hand. Before she could ask what was wrong, her own phone buzzed nonstop. The moment she unlocked it, her blood ran cold. Front page headline: CEO Damien Lancaster's secret baby with former assistant, hidden for 8 months. Paparazzi photos of her at the hospital, of Damien, his face unreadable as he walked through the ER doors. Her breath hitched. A cold dread settled in her chest. She looked up at Damien, her voice barely above a whisper. "How?" "Whitmore." Damien's jaw tightened. "He was at the office yesterday. He must have overheard something, and now the entire world knows." Sophia gripped her phone. "This could destroy your reputation," she whispered. "I don't care," Damien cut her off, "but I won't let them drag you through the mud." Another message popped up on her phone. An email from the board of directors. "We need to face this," Damien said. "Right now." 20 minutes later, they entered the main conference room of Lancaster Holdings, where the board was waiting. But that wasn't the only thing that made Sophia's stomach twist. The press was there too. A reporter stood the moment they walked in. "Mr. Lancaster, rumors say Ms. Carter was promoted because she's the mother of your child. Care to comment?" Damien didn't hesitate. "Ms. Carter was promoted because she's one of the most capable employees at Lancaster Holdings. That is the only reason." "And your personal relationship with her?" Sophia took a deep breath. This moment would change everything. Sophia could feel the camera flashes exploding around her, the scrutinizing gazes of the board members drilling into her. She glanced at Damien. He was calm, composed, but his hand resting on the table was clenched so tightly that his knuckles had turned white. Another reporter spoke up. "Mr. Lancaster, what about the child? Do you intend to publicly acknowledge your role?" Damien straightened, his voice steady and firm. "Lucas Lancaster is my son. I have nothing to hide." Silence fell over the room. Sophia swallowed hard. This was it. If she didn't speak now, the rumors would spiral out of control. She clenched her hands, then stepped forward. "I hid this because I was afraid," she said, her voice clear despite her pounding heart. Not because I wanted to manipulate anyone, but because I didn't know how to face it. A moment of silence. Then, a reporter asked, "Afraid of what, Miss Carter?" She took a deep breath and turned to Damien. Afraid he wouldn't want a family, afraid that if I told him he would see it as a burden rather than something precious. Damien stared at her. Then, in front of the entire press and boardroom, he reached for the microphone. "The only thing I regret," he said slowly, "is that she didn't tell me sooner." The entire room seemed to freeze. And if anyone in this room believes I'd let the woman I love and the mother of my child walk away, then you've grossly underestimated who I am. A murmur swept through the audience, but Sophia could only look at Damien. He wasn't looking away. He was here, for her, for Lucas. 6 months later, autumn rain drizzled over New York. Inside Damien's penthouse, the golden glow of the lights cast a warm contrast to the storm that had changed everything half a year ago. Sophia stood by the window, cradling Lucas in her arms. He had grown so much, soft brown hair curling at his forehead, gray eyes mirroring the man who had claimed him as his own. "What are you thinking about?" Damien's voice came from behind her. Sophia smiled softly. "Chicago. That storm." Damien stepped closer, wrapping an arm around both her and their son. "Oh?" She nodded. "Back then, I thought it was just a fleeting moment. A mistake." Damien leaned down, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "And now?" Sophia turned to face him, no longer afraid, no longer uncertain. "Now," she whispered, "I think it was the beginning of us." Damien smiled, one of those rare, unguarded smiles that only she and Lucas ever saw. "I think so too." Outside, the rain continued to fall, but this time, it didn't signal the end of something. It marked a new beginning. A real family born not from perfection, but from love, struggle, and the choice to stay. The weight of her backpack felt heavier with every step as Anna hurried down the sidewalk, exhaustion settling into her bones after 3 back-to-back classes and an 8-hour shift at the coffee shop. The biting November air cut through her thin jacket, a sharp reminder that winter was approaching, and she still couldn't afford a proper coat. When the No 42 bus pulled up, Anna let out a quiet sigh of relief. She climbed aboard, flashing her monthly pass at the driver, a grumpy middle-aged man with perpetually furrowed brows, before slumping into a window seat. Resting her forehead against the cool glass, she watched the city lights blur together, her eyelids growing heavy. "Wait!" A male voice rang out just as the doors began to close. The driver scowled but begrudgingly reopened them. A young man in his early 20s jogged aboard, slightly out of breath. He wore a plain gray sweater that somehow looked expensive, his dark brown hair tousled by the wind. There was something about his confident posture that made a few passengers glance up. "There'll be $3.50, the driver announced flatly. The young man patted his pockets, his expression shifting from confusion to growing panic. I think I left my wallet at home." His voice faltered, embarrassment flickering across his features. "No money, no ride," the driver said, already gesturing toward the door. "I've got a schedule to keep." Anna observed the exchange, recognizing the unmistakable look of humiliation. She knew that feeling all too well. Without overthinking it, she stood up, walked forward, and reached into her pocket for the loose change she'd received as tips earlier. "Here," she said, extending $3.25. "I've got it." The young man turned to her, surprise evident in his amber eyes. For a moment he seemed about to refuse, but then he nodded, gratitude softening his face. "Thank you. I'll pay you back." "Don't worry about it," Anna offered a tired smile before returning to her seat. The young man took a seat a few rows ahead, glancing back at her occasionally. But Anna hardly noticed, lost in thoughts of tomorrow's exam and whether her mother had remembered to take her medication. What she didn't know was that she had just helped Tom Whitaker, heir to the Whitaker Grand Hotel empire, with luxury properties spanning 3 continents. The same Tom whose face sometimes appeared in business magazines beside headlines about the future of the hospitality industry. As the bus rumbled through the city streets, 2 worlds briefly intersected, neither realizing that this small moment would change everything. The espresso machine whirred as Anna worked behind the counter, her hands moving with the effortless precision of someone who had spent 2 years perfecting the art of making coffee. Even on the most exhausting days, she could steam milk and pour perfect latte art without a second thought. "Grande caramel latte with almond milk," Anna called, sliding the cup across the counter without looking up. "Thanks," a familiar voice replied. Anna glanced up instinctively and froze. Standing before her, wearing the same confident expression, was the guy from the bus. "It's you?" she blurted out. He shrugged, amusement flickering in his eyes. "Told you I'd pay you back." "You didn't have to come all this way just for $3.50, Anna said, still caught off guard. "Maybe I just wanted good coffee too," Tom replied, a hint of something playful in his voice. "I'm Tom, by the way." "Anna," she responded automatically, but before she could say more, Lisa, her co-worker, nudged her urgently. "We've got 6 people waiting on drinks, Anna." "Right, sorry." She turned back to her work, but she could still feel Tom's gaze on her as he stepped away from the counter. Out of the corner of her eye, she saw him take a seat by the window, pulling out a book instead of his phone, an oddly refreshing detail. Throughout her shift, their eyes met occasionally, brief glances quickly averted. When the rush finally died down, Anna grabbed a rag and approached his table. "So," she said, smirking, "do you make a habit of forgetting your wallet?" Tom chuckled, closing his book. "Not usually. Yesterday was unusual." "How so?" Anna teased. Tom hesitated slightly before answering. "Let's just say I'm trying something new." Anna raised an eyebrow. "Mysterious?" "Not intentionally," he admitted, his expression turning more serious. "Honestly, I came back for another reason. Yesterday, you were the first person who did something nice for me without expecting anything in return." "It was just bus fare," Anna said, a little thrown by his intensity. "Still," Tom said earnestly, "I'd like to thank you properly. Maybe with coffee, sometime, when you're not working." Anna studied him carefully. There was something about him she couldn't quite figure out, something he wasn't saying, but his eyes seemed genuine. "I don't even know you," she pointed out. "That's the point of coffee, isn't it? To get to know someone," Tom grinned. Before she could answer, her manager's voice called from behind the counter. "Anna, your break's over." She hesitated, then glanced back at Tom. "I'm here most mornings," he said quickly. "Think about it." Anna nodded slightly before returning to work. For the rest of her shift, she found herself glancing at the spot where he had been sitting, but the next time she looked, the seat was empty. And strangely, she found herself feeling disappointed. Mornings at Brew and Bean had become part of Tom's routine. Every day, without fail, he showed up, ordered a black coffee, and settled into his usual seat by the window. At first, Anna told herself it was just a coincidence. But as the days passed and he kept returning, she couldn't deny the truth. She had started to look forward to those fleeting glances and the short conversations they shared when the shop wasn't too busy. "You really like the coffee here that much?" Anna teased one morning as she wiped down the table near him. Tom smirked, stirring his coffee lazily. "Maybe I just like the place for a different reason." Anna rolled her eyes, but the smile tugging at her lips gave her away. After a few weeks, their interactions extended beyond the coffee shop. At first, it was accidental. Bumping into each other at a bookstore, spotting each other at a small diner near Anna's university. But then, the meetings were no longer coincidences. One evening, after Anna's shift ended, Tom was waiting outside. "Want to take a walk?" he asked. She hesitated for just a second before nodding. They strolled through the city streets, the glow of streetlights casting soft golden hues around them. They talked about everything: music, art, places they dreamed of visiting. Anna shared her love for Renaissance paintings, her dream of working in a museum someday. Tom listened, his eyes fixed on her, taking in every word. But when she turned the questions on him, his family, his past, why he left his job, his answers remained vague. "I used to work in business," he said simply, "but it wasn't the kind of life I wanted." Anna sensed he was holding something back, but she didn't press. What she didn't know was that, despite wanting to open up to her, Tom wasn't ready to let her see the full truth just yet. It was late afternoon, and Brew and Bean was busier than usual. Anna moved quickly behind the counter, calling out orders, barely pausing to catch her breath. The rush was so intense that she hardly noticed when Tom walked in. "Cappuccino, please." She glanced up instinctively, a small smile forming before she even realized it. "You again?" Tom shrugged, dropping a $5 bill into the tip jar. "Told you, I like this place." Before they could say more, the door chimed and a middle-aged man in a tailored suit stepped inside. Anna barely registered his presence, but she noticed the way Tom tensed the moment their eyes met. "Tom?" The man squinted, his tone laced with surprise and amusement. "No way." Tom turned away slightly, as if hoping to go unnoticed. "Too late." "Didn't expect to find you in a place like this," the man continued, smirking. "Let me guess, you're experiencing life among the common folk?" Anna frowned, glancing between Tom and the stranger. But before she could ask, another voice cut through the air. Tom Whitaker. A journalist, her press badge swinging from her neck, stood near the counter, phone raised, camera ready. The heir to Whitaker Grand Hotels, slumming it in a local coffee shop. Is this part of some elaborate PR stunt? The room seemed to tilt. Tom Whitaker? As in Whitaker Grand Hotels? The luxury chain with billboards all over the city? Anna turned to Tom, but he said nothing. His silence told her everything. "Anna," Tom started, stepping toward her. She took a step back. "Who are you?" "I was going to tell you," he said quietly, desperation creeping into his voice. "I just needed the right moment." "The right moment?" Anna let out a bitter laugh. "You had weeks, and now I find out from a reporter instead of from you?" The murmurs around the cafe grew louder. Lisa, standing nearby, crossed her arms. "Knew something was off," she muttered. Anna inhaled sharply, trying to keep her emotions in check. She felt exposed, humiliated. Every conversation they'd had, every time he listened to her talk about struggling to pay rent, about her mother's medical bills, Tom had known. He had always known. "You lied to me from the start," she whispered. "No, I never—" "Don't," she cut him off. "I can't do this." She pulled off her apron, feeling suffocated, and turned toward the exit. Tom could only stand there, watching as she disappeared through the door. And in that moment, he knew. He had lost her. Tom stood frozen outside Brew and Bean, watching as Anna disappeared into the bustling city crowd. He wanted to chase after her, to explain, to make her stay, but how could he, when he had already shattered the trust between them? For the first time in his life, words weren't enough. 2 days later, in the massive penthouse apartment his family owned, Tom stood before his father, Richard Whittaker, the man who had dictated his future since the day he was born. "You've caused enough of a mess," Richard said, his tone cool, calculated. "The media is circling like vultures. It's time to stop pretending and step back into the life you were meant for." Tom met his father's gaze, steady and unflinching. "I'm not coming back." Richard scoffed. "And what do you plan to do? Walk away from an empire? All for some barista?" "No," Tom said firmly. "I'm leaving because I refuse to live a life that isn't mine." 3 days later, Tom left the city with nothing but a small backpack and what little savings he had. He didn't know exactly where he was going, only that he needed to figure out who he was without the weight of the Whittaker name. What he didn't know was that, even from a distance, Anna was still watching. 3 weeks had passed since everything fell apart. Anna threw herself into work and school, but no matter how busy she kept herself, she couldn't erase Tom from her thoughts. The question nagged at her. If he was just a liar, why would he walk away from everything? She avoided reading about Whittaker Grand Hotels, but every time she accidentally came across a headline about the missing heir, her heart clenched. One evening, as she set the table for dinner in their tiny apartment, her mother, Margaret, spoke up. "You're still thinking about him." Anna sighed, setting down the plates. "I don't know." "Then why do you still check the news for updates on him?" Anna stayed silent. Her mother studied her for a long moment before saying gently, "If you really want to close this chapter, you need to hear the truth for yourself." Anna tossed and turned, but sleep refused to come. Her mind raced with conflicting emotions. Anger, confusion, something dangerously close to hope. She reached for her laptop, hesitating before typing his name. Did she really want to open this door again? And yet, before she could stop herself, her fingers moved on their own, searching for any trace of where he had gone. She typed Tom Whittaker into the search bar. Not to find articles about his family, but to track down where he had gone. At Pinewood Lodge, a small secluded inn in the mountains, far from the glass towers of the city. And for the first time in weeks, Anna knew exactly what she needed to do. The winding road leading to Pinewood Lodge snaked through misty mountain ridges. As the bus came to a stop at a gravel-lined path, Anna pulled her coat tighter around her. In the distance, the lodge came into view, a rustic wooden building, a stark contrast to the sleek luxury of Whittaker hotels. She took a steadying breath before stepping inside. Behind the front desk, an older man with a graying beard looked up. "Looking for a room?" Anna shook her head. "I'm looking for someone. Tom Whittaker. He works here." The man's brows lifted slightly before he nodded. "He's cleaning rooms. I'll get him." Before Anna could fully brace herself, a door behind the desk swung open. Tom walked out, carrying a stack of towels. Their eyes met. Tom froze, nearly dropping the towels. Anna held her breath, her heart pounding. She didn't know what she expected. An apologetic look, a hesitant smile. But all she saw was pure shock in his amber gaze. "Anna?" His voice was rough, disbelieving. She swallowed. "Hey, Tom." The lodge manager quietly excused himself, leaving them alone in the hushed space. "What are you doing here?" Tom finally asked. "I don't know," Anna admitted. "I just needed to hear the truth from you." Tom exhaled, setting the towels down. "I should have told you from the beginning." Anna crossed her arms, studying him. "Then tell me now." Tom took a deep breath. "I didn't want you to see me as a Whittaker. I grew up in a world where people only cared about money and power. When I left, I wanted to figure out who I was without all of that. And then I met you." Anna held his gaze. And you thought lying was the best way? No, Tom said quietly. I was wrong. But with you, for the first time, I wasn't an heir. I was just a guy on a bus, someone who liked coffee, someone who loved listening to you talk about art. A cold wind drifted in through an open window, but Anna didn't feel the chill. Have you changed? She asked. Tom looked straight into her eyes. I don't know if it's enough, but I know I'm never going back to the life I left behind. The silence between them no longer felt heavy. It was just two people, once lost to each other, standing in a quiet mountain lodge, trying to find something worth holding on to again. Mornings in the mountains were far quieter than the city. The first rays of sunlight filtered through the pines, casting a golden glow over the still waters of the lake outside Pinewood Lodge. Anna sat on a wooden bench, cradling a cup of hot coffee between her hands. Beside her, Tom sat in silence, watching the gentle ripples across the surface. Are you planning to stay here forever? She asked, breaking the quiet. Tom took a deep breath, as if weighing his answer. I don't know, it's peaceful here, but it's not everything I want. Anna nodded. She understood. In some ways, Tom had found himself here, but that didn't mean he was meant to stay. Setting her cup down, she turned to him. So, what are you going to do next? Tom met her gaze, a slow smile forming. I think it's time to go back to the real world, but on my own terms. A few months later, Tom returned to the city, not to reclaim Whitaker Grand Hotels, but to build something of his own, a consulting firm that helped small, independent hotels compete against corporate giants. Instead of using his expertise to grow his family's wealth, he used it to help those trying to succeed on their own terms. Anna, too, followed her own path. She graduated and landed her dream job at a renowned art museum. But most importantly, they remained together. They took their time. No secrets, no masks. Just two people who had chosen each other, day by day, step by step. One evening, at the first exhibition Anna curated, Tom arrived just as she was feeling the weight of nervous anticipation. I figured you could use some encouragement, he said, handing her a small wrapped box. Anna opened it. Inside was an antique silver bookmark engraved with Renaissance patterns. You always talk about forgotten female artists, Tom explained. I found this at an old bookshop. It reminded me of you. Anna smiled, warmth blooming in her chest. Some love stories weren't about fate. They weren't about grand gestures or fairy tale endings. Sometimes love was simply about a choice, choosing each other every single day, despite everything. Rain poured over the city like silver threads, each drop clinging to the glass, reflecting the glimmering streetlights. Inside the Vaughn estate, Lena stood silently by the window, her fingers absent-mindedly tracing the trails of raindrops running down the cold glass. She was used to this feeling, the isolation, the heavy silence of a house that once overflowed with warmth and laughter. Ever since her mother passed away, everything had become a mere shadow of the past. Her father, James Vaughn, once a lively and devoted man, had slowly drowned in grief and work, his laughter fading into distant memories. And that was when Vivian Rothwell entered their lives. Vivian wasn't just James's new wife. She was the one who controlled everything in the Vaughn household. To outsiders, she was elegance itself, charming, sophisticated, and poised. But behind closed doors, her true nature surfaced. Cold, calculating, every word a carefully crafted dagger wrapped in silk. Lena had learned to read her stepmother's every move, the measured steps, the sharp glances, the subtle yet cutting remarks designed to break her down. Tonight, the sound of heels echoed down the hallway. She knew the storm was coming. The door swung open, revealing Vivian, her smile as sharp as a blade hidden in velvet. "Come downstairs, Lena," she said, her voice smooth as honey, but laced with quiet authority. "There's someone who wants to meet you." Lena turned, keeping her face unreadable. She had no idea what awaited her downstairs, but unease coiled in her stomach, a silent warning that her world was about to change forever. She took a deep breath and stepped out of the room, one step that could alter the course of her life. Lena descended the grand staircase slowly, each step pulling her closer to a fate she hadn't chosen. The soft glow of the chandelier barely illuminated the dark shadows stretching across the vast living room. A deep, authoritative voice cut through the quiet hum of the rain outside. $10 million. That's my offer. An investment in Vaughn Enterprises in exchange for a marriage. Lena froze. Her pulse pounded in her ears. Stepping into the room, she took in the scene before her. James Vaughn, her father, sat in his usual leather armchair, his fingers wrapped tightly around a whiskey glass, his face weary and distant. Beside him stood Vivian Rothwell, her lips curled into a satisfied yet utterly insincere smile. But the man who truly commanded the room was Richard Montgomery. He carried the air of someone who was always in control, his tailored black suit, salt and pepper hair slicked back, and piercing eyes that never wavered. "Marriage?" Lena's voice came out sharp, edged with disbelief. Vivian stepped forward, resting a gentle yet unyielding hand on her shoulder. "Calm yourself, Lena," she cooed, her voice dripping with artificial sweetness. "This is an incredible opportunity. Marrying Killian Montgomery won't just secure your future, it will save your father's company." Lena jerked her shoulder away, eyes blazing. "Opportunity? This is a transaction," she spat. "You're selling me off like a piece of property." Vivian let out a soft, patronizing laugh. "Selling you? Don't be so dramatic. Do you have any idea how many girls would kill for this chance?" Lena turned to her father, desperation rising in her chest. She needed him to say something, to fight for her. But James Vaughn only lifted his glass and took another long, slow sip. A sharp pang sliced through her chest. Richard Montgomery observed the exchange with an air of quiet amusement, as if he had already anticipated the outcome. "Oh, do we have a deal?" he asked, his gaze fixed on James. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then, at last, James gave a small nod. Lena's world collapsed beneath her feet. Outside, the rain continued to fall. She had been sold, and no one cared but her. The sky was dull gray the next morning, mirroring Lena's mood. Last night's rain had stopped, but the cold emptiness still clung to her, a quiet warning of what was to come. She sat in Vivian's sleek black car, wearing a plain white dress her stepmother had chosen. "Nothing too extravagant," Vivian had said when she handed it to her that morning. "Something appropriate for a girl in your situation." Lena hated the dress. It wasn't a wedding gown. It felt more like a uniform for someone being sent to prison. The car pulled up outside an old courthouse. There was no church, no flowers, no music. Nothing about this resembled a wedding. It was just a deal being finalized in silence. She stepped inside, where a weary-looking judge waited. Her father sat beside Vivian, who looked pleased as ever. On the other side of the room stood Killian Montgomery. Lena had never seen him before, and he wasn't what she expected. He didn't look cruel or arrogant, like a man willing to buy a wife with money. Killian was tall, his gray eyes sharp but not filled with contempt. As she approached, he studied her for a long moment before speaking, his voice low and firm. "I know you don't want this, but I promise you one thing. I won't make it worse than it has to be." Lena didn't know how to respond. She had expected a monster, a man like his father. Instead, she found someone different. The judge began reciting the vows. Everything happened too fast, as if someone had pressed fast forward on her life without her consent. "Miss Lena Vaughn, do you take Killian Montgomery as your lawfully wedded husband?" Her throat closed up. She wanted to say no, to scream, to run, but Vivian's gaze was razor sharp, watching her like a predator. Her father sat still, his hands trembling, unable to meet her eyes. No one was going to save her from this. "I do?" The words barely left her lips, carrying the weight of a girl forced into a marriage she never wanted. The wedding band slid onto her finger, cold, foreign. The judge declared them husband and wife. There was no celebration, no applause. Killian leaned in slightly, his voice just above a whisper. "I'm not the husband you expected, but I also won't be the man you fear." Lena looked at him but said nothing, because right now, she wasn't sure what was more terrifying, him or the marriage itself. Lena sat in silence as the luxury car glided through the streets of New York, carrying her toward an unfamiliar world. Towering skyscrapers gleamed under the sun, reflecting a life that seemed beautiful yet unreachable, just like her own now. The sleek black Bentley turned down a private road, passing through the massive wrought iron gates of the Montgomery estate. The building ahead wasn't just a mansion, it was a palace, a masterpiece of stone and glass, its towering windows and manicured gardens screaming of wealth and power. But to Lena, it wasn't a home, it was a gilded cage. When the car stopped, Killian opened the door, offering his hand. She stared at it for a moment before stepping out without accepting his help. He didn't react. He simply turned and led the way inside. Lena nearly lost her breath at the opulence surrounding her. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceilings, their lights reflecting off polished marble floors. Gilded frames held paintings so old they looked like they belonged in a museum. A kind-looking older woman approached with a warm smile. "Welcome to the Montgomery estate, ma'am," she said gently. "I'm Mrs. Collins, the housekeeper. If you need anything, just let me know." She seemed nice, but it didn't change the fact that this wasn't home. Killian led her down a long corridor before stopping at a set of ornately carved double doors. "This is your room," he said, his voice neutral. "You have complete privacy here. No one enters unless you allow it." Lena blinked in surprise. She had expected control, restrictions, but instead he was giving her space? Slowly, she pushed the door open. The room was massive, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a garden full of roses. A grand bed with soft ivory sheets sat in the center, flanked by elegant furniture and a wall of bookshelves. On the polished wooden vanity, there was a note and a key. She picked up the note, her fingers tracing the bold yet refined handwriting. "This is your home. Make it your own." Lena set the card down slowly. She had no idea what awaited her in this new life. But at least in this gilded cage, she had been given a space to breathe. The first few days at the Montgomery estate passed in an unsettling silence. Killian kept his promise. He didn't control Lena, nor did he interfere with her life. But that didn't mean she could forget everything. Vivian had sold her. A quiet rage simmered inside her every time she remembered her stepmother's satisfied smirk, the cold indifference in her father's eyes. But fate, it seemed, had its own plans. One afternoon, as Lena was reading in her room, there was a knock on the door. "You have a visitor," Mrs. Collins said gently. "It's your father." Lena froze. The housekeeper hesitated as if she wanted to say more, but simply gave a soft smile before stepping away. When Lena reached the living room, she could hardly believe her eyes. James Vaughn sat there, looking more broken than she had ever seen him. His hair had grayed significantly, deep lines etched across his face, and his once proud shoulders slumped under an invisible weight. But Vivian was nowhere in sight. "Hey, are you here?" Lena's voice was cold. "Did you come to check if I've adjusted to my new life?" James met his daughter's gaze, regret written all over his face. "Vivian has been arrested," he said quietly. Lena needed a moment to process the words. "Arrested?" she echoed, disbelief lacing her tone. James nodded, his hands trembling slightly as he held his untouched glass of water. "After you left, everything started to unravel. The police launched an investigation into Vaughn Enterprises and found that Vivian had been embezzling millions for years. She was using company money to fund her extravagant lifestyle." Something strange stirred inside Lena. Not joy, not satisfaction, just relief. "And you?" she asked. James let out a bitter chuckle. "I let her control everything for too long. Now I have nothing, Lena." She looked at the man before her, the father she had once loved, once trusted. Now he was just a shell of the man he used to be. And perhaps he had realized it far too late. After meeting her father, Lena felt empty. She had once imagined the day Vivian would finally pay for what she had done, but now that it had happened, the satisfaction she expected never came. Instead, there was only exhaustion. That night, as she sat alone by the massive window in her room, a deep voice broke the silence behind her. "Are you okay?" Lena turned. Killian stood in the doorway, hands in his pockets, his expression unreadable. He rarely initiated conversations with her, so the fact that he was doing so now caught her off guard. "I don't know," she admitted. Killian nodded, as if he understood that feeling better than she did. He stepped forward, pulling a chair closer to her. "Do you want to talk about it?" Lena hesitated. She didn't think he actually cared. They were just two strangers, bound by a marriage neither of them had wanted. But then she realized something. He had never treated her like property. Even though their marriage wasn't built on love, Killian had never forced anything upon her. So for the first time, she decided to trust him. "Vivian was arrested," she said quietly. "She had been embezzling money from my father's company for years." Killian didn't look surprised. "I figured that would happen." Lena turned to him. "You knew?" He shrugged. "Not the details, but I know people like her. They always destroy themselves in the end." A long silence stretched between them, but it wasn't tense like before. "I don't know how I'm supposed to feel," Lena sighed. "You don't have to decide right now," Killian said, his voice calm but surprisingly gentle. "Emotions aren't always as simple as we want them to be." Lena studied him a little longer. She had once thought she would hate this man, but now he didn't seem like a stranger anymore. Maybe this marriage wasn't a prison after all. Maybe it was something else, a beginning she had never expected. In the weeks that followed, the relationship between Lena and Killian began to shift in subtle ways. He was no longer just the stranger she had been forced to marry. He became a part of her life in ways she never expected. At first, it was small things. Killian kept his distance, gave her space, but sometimes he appeared just when she needed someone. One afternoon, Lena took a walk through the estate's garden. The air was calm, the roses in full bloom, but inside, her thoughts were anything but peaceful. She had lost so much: her family, her freedom, the carefree innocence of youth. "You seem to like this garden," a voice came from behind her. Lena turned to see Killian leaning against the glass doorway, a cup of coffee in his hand. "I like the quiet," she admitted. "At least, it doesn't try to control me." Killian nodded, then suddenly asked, "Have you ever thought about leaving?" The question made Lena freeze. Of course she had thought about it. But leaving? And then what? She had no money, no place to go. Her whole world had been controlled for so long that she no longer knew what she actually wanted. "I don't know," she admitted. "Can you give me an answer?" Killian was quiet for a moment before sighing. "I don't think you're the kind of person who lets others decide her life for her." Lena was caught off guard by that statement. No one had ever spoken about her that way before. All her life she had been told what to do, who to be, but for the first time someone was telling her she could choose her own fate. For the first time, Killian wasn't just a husband on paper. He was someone who made her see herself differently. Lena never thought her heart could change. She had entered this marriage with fear and resentment, believing Killian was just like every other man in her life, a person who wanted to control and own her. But he wasn't like that. The change didn't come from some grand moment. It came from the little things. The quiet evenings when Killian sat with her on the balcony, both of them silently watching the city lights. The way he noticed how she liked her coffee and made sure it was prepared exactly right every morning. And most of all, he never forced anything on her. One evening, after dinner on the rooftop, Lena absent-mindedly reached for a napkin. At the same time, Killian moved his hand forward, and their fingers brushed against each other. She felt the warmth of his touch. It was just a fleeting second, but in that second, she realized everything had changed. Lena quickly pulled her hand back, her heartbeat louder than it should be. She looked up and met Killian's gaze. It wasn't cold, it wasn't distant. It was soft, gentle, and something else she had never seen before. Lena started to say something, but the words wouldn't come. Killian only gave a small smile, as if he understood exactly what she was feeling. "It's okay," he said quietly. "Take your time." She nodded, but as she turned away, she knew it was already too late to turn back. Something had begun between them, and it couldn't be ignored anymore. After that moment, Lena knew everything between her and Killian had changed. Neither of them mentioned the way their fingers had touched that night, but it lingered, unspoken yet undeniable. They became more comfortable in the silence. Killian was no longer a stranger she feared, and Lena was no longer just a girl trapped in an unwanted marriage. They were becoming something else. One night, when Lena couldn't sleep, she went down to the kitchen for a glass of water. She didn't expect to see Killian there, sitting at the counter with a glass of whiskey in his hand. "Can't sleep?" he asked, his voice low and warm in the quiet room. Lena nodded, then glanced at him. "And you?" Killian swirled the amber liquid in his glass, the dim light casting shadows across his sharp features, revealing a tiredness she hadn't noticed before. "Neither can I." Lena didn't know why she spoke, but the words slipped out anyway. "Do you ever feel lost?" Killian held her gaze for a long moment before answering quietly. "Everyone does, at some point." Neither of them said anything more, but there was an understanding in their silence. They were two people thrown into a life they hadn't chosen, but now they were learning how to find their own way. And maybe they wouldn't have to do it alone anymore. The storm that night came without warning. Winds howled against the windows, branches scraped against the glass like they were trying to break the silence of the Montgomery estate. Lena jerked awake, her heart pounding in her chest. She hated storms. As a child, whenever there was thunder, her mother would hold her close, soothing her with soft stories. But now her mother was gone, and this massive room only made her feel more alone than ever. A loud crash of thunder shook the walls. Before she could think, she was out of bed, walking down the dimly lit hallway. She wasn't sure where she was going. Her feet simply moved on instinct. It wasn't until she found herself standing in front of Killian's door that she hesitated. But before she could turn away, the door opened. Killian stood there, his shirt unbuttoned at the top, his sharp eyes scanning her face before settling on the lingering fear in her expression. "Are you okay?" His voice was low, softer than usual. Lena didn't know how to answer. She wasn't okay, but she didn't want to admit it either. Killian studied her for a moment, then silently stepped aside, an unspoken invitation. Lena walked in. His room felt warmer than hers. She let out a slow breath as she sank into a chair by the window, listening to the heavy rain pounding against the glass. Killian said nothing, simply poured her a cup of tea from the pot on the table and set it in her hands. A small, quiet gesture, but full of understanding. "Thank you," she murmured. Killian sat across from her, his gaze steady, as if trying to read the thoughts she couldn't bring herself to say. "I used to hate you," Lena admitted suddenly. "I thought you were just another man trying to control my life." Killian tilted his head slightly. And now? She held his gaze for a long moment, then exhaled softly. Now, I'm not so sure. Something shifted in Killian's expression, a flicker of warmth mixed with something more careful. Slowly, he reached up and brushed a loose strand of hair from her cheek. She stopped breathing. They were standing on a fragile boundary, one that, if crossed, would change everything forever. But when Killian finally spoke, his voice was calm and certain. "Lena, I won't do anything you don't want." She didn't know why, but those words made her chest tighten. Not from fear, but from a kind of safety she had never known before. She nodded. And that night, in a room warmer than the raging storm outside, they sat together in silence. No pressure, no expectations, just the quiet presence of one another. And perhaps that was the beginning of something far deeper. After that stormy night, everything between Lena and Killian changed. They didn't talk about it. No one mentioned how Lena had sought him out in the middle of the storm, but the silence between them wasn't the same anymore. Now, when Killian walked into a room, Lena no longer tensed. When their hands brushed accidentally, she didn't pull away so quickly. Her feelings toward him had shifted, in a way she wasn't ready to admit. One morning, as Lena sat reading in the library, Killian walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. He set one in front of her. "Just the way you like it," he said simply. Lena looked at him, then at the coffee. It was such a small thing, but somehow it warmed her more than the drink itself. "Thank you," she murmured. Killian sat down beside her, opening his own book. They didn't speak, but in that silence, something had shifted. Something familiar. Something more than an obligation. Something neither of them was ready to name. Lena never thought she would have a choice. Her life had always been dictated by others, her father, her stepmother, and now this forced marriage to Killian. But for the first time, she started to wonder, if she could truly choose, what would she want? One afternoon, as Lena stood on the balcony gazing at the endless sky, Killian stepped beside her. They stood there, silent, but no longer distant. "Have you ever thought about the future?" Killian asked, his voice deep and steady. Lena turned to him. The future was never mine to think about. Killian nodded, as if he had expected that answer. He looked at her then, his gaze serious but never demanding. "If you could choose, what would you do?" She didn't have an answer right away. But as she met Killian's eyes, for the first time in her life, she realized she actually had a choice. And maybe that choice had never been clearer. Lena was never the type to act on impulse. Her whole life had been controlled, dictated, and she had learned to be cautious with every decision she made. But with Killian, everything was different. One evening, as they sat by the fireplace, Lena looked at Killian in a way she never had before. He was no longer just the man she had been forced to marry. He was the one who quietly placed a cup of coffee exactly the way she liked it every morning. The one who listened even when she didn't know how to put her thoughts into words. The one who saw her, not as an obligation, but as a person. She set her tea down, taking a deep breath. "I want to try." Killian's brow furrowed slightly, his eyes searching hers. "Try what?" She swallowed, her heart pounding harder than ever. "Try trusting you." The air between them became impossibly still. Killian didn't smile, didn't tease, he just looked at her for a long moment, as if trying to determine whether she truly meant it. Then slowly he held out his hand. Lena stared at it, hesitation flickering in her gaze. But then she placed her hand in his. The warmth of his palm spread through her, but it wasn't just warmth, it was safety, certainty. Lena met his gaze, her eyes filled with something unspoken. Killian held her stare, and this time there was no restraint left. Neither knew who leaned in first, but in the next moment, their lips met. The kiss was hesitant at first, slow and searching, as if they were still testing this new boundary. But then, Killian couldn't hold back anymore. He pulled her closer, his hands cradling her face, deepening the kiss, claiming it. Lena didn't pull away. Instead, she melted into him, surrendering to the moment. From that second on, there was no turning back. Killian lifted Lena into his arms, carrying her to his bedroom, his movements steady, certain, like he had known all along that this was where they were meant to be. When they reached the bed, He paused, searching her eyes for permission one last time. But Lena didn't answer with words. Instead, she slowly unbuttoned his shirt, and Killian knew she had made her choice. That night, they came together, not just in passion, but in trust, in acceptance, in something neither of them had dared to name before. As dawn approached, Lena lay against Killian's chest, their breaths rising and falling as one. And she knew this wasn't just any night. It was the first leap into a love she had never believed she could have. 1 year later, Lena stood on the balcony of the Montgomery estate, watching the golden hues of the sunset bathe the vast gardens below. Everything had changed. She was no longer the girl forced into this marriage. She had chosen to stay, chosen to love Killian, chosen a life she never thought she could have. Her hand rested gently on her stomach, where a tiny life was growing. "What are you thinking about?" Killian's deep, familiar voice broke the silence as he stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist, his chin resting lightly on her shoulder. Lena smiled, leaning into his warmth, the place that now truly felt like home. "I'm thinking about everything," she whispered. "About us, about how it all began, and about our baby." Killian chuckled softly, his hand covering hers, feeling the warmth of their growing child. "If someone had told me a year ago that I would fall in love with the woman I married in a business deal, I wouldn't have believed them." Lena turned to face him, her fingers tracing the face she had come to love more than anything in the world. "And if someone had told me that one day I'd choose to stay because of love, I wouldn't have believed them either." Killian tilted his head down, kissing her, slow and deep the way he always did, with reverence, with devotion. The evening breeze whispered around them, but their hearts had never felt warmer. Their story hadn't begun as a love story, but they had made it one of the most beautiful stories they could write together. Because love isn't something that's predetermined, it's something we choose every single day. And Lena had chosen Killian, just as Killian had chosen her, forever.